Our next topic, you know, some people love them, some people hate them. And in South Africa, we had the doyen of rugby, Dr. Adrian Crane, and he used to say they are a necessary nuisance. And I'm referring to referees. Coming from 3 different countries in the world, and we are going to invite them to do their presentation. We've got Adrian Crane from the USA. We've got Igor Dorotic from the beautiful Croatia. And of course we have Mark Goulding from the even more beautiful South Africa. Right, so ladies and gentlemen, these are your referees. They took care of you over the past 10 days when you were participating and competing. And of course, we will hand it over to them. They will have a brief introduction and a few questions. And of course, we would like to hear what is the reason for having referees at a race like this.
Thank you very much. So welcome everybody, and to those competitors, we do understand how much you put into preparing for a race, coming to the race and racing in the race. We have all been racers ourselves, we've all been race organizers, and now we're referees, and we absolutely understand the huge effort you put into racing, and we hope that we can do you justice as referees. It was very true what our introducer Johan said, that I'm not sure if anybody actually does love us, but certainly lots of people hate us or don't like us. But it's necessary. So if we could go on to here we go, the reason for rules. In an ideal world, if we had endless wilderness available, we could give you a start line and a finish line and say first to get there is the winner. But unfortunately, in this modern world, we're constrained by civilization, by roads, by government laws, all kinds of things. And so we have to add rules to what we wish was a very simple, straightforward race. And I hope every competitor at least has read the AR World Series rules, and I'm sorry that it is currently 10 or 12 pages, and I can't say it won't get longer in the future, but these rules, I hope you realize, are necessary. We would love to have no rules, but we need to have some rules. So the rules are there to really make up for the fact that we don't have that ideal scenario of endless wilderness. And I do hope that all the competitors understand that. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have just to interrupt quickly. One person has broken some of the rules, and this is a vehicle that is parked in some activity. So please, the owner of a Hyundai HXW 7556 EC, please remove it, otherwise you will be penalized by an hour. So please that person just remove your vehicle.
And if you could give us that team number later, we'd appreciate it. And then, regarding the rules governing a race, I'm going to hand this to Igor.
Yeah, hi. So we're all coming from a world that is filled with rules. You know, driving on the road, working rules, marriage rules, all sorts of rules. So one would think that coming to a race, you will be going on a 7-day holidays without any rules. But that cannot happen because there is ranking involved, there is prize money involved, there is status involved. points, and some people are just competing for the status and for the glory. But nonetheless, we have a ranking, and the ranking should be in sort of boundaries with the rules. So ARWS came up with a set of rules. It's about 12 pages at the moment. And I always say at my race, I'm also a race director, I always say not knowing the rules is not an excuse for breaking them. And you always see that a lot of teams are unaware of the rules, but we always keep saying you have to read the rules, you have to understand the rules. We know that sometimes it's a language barrier, but often it's just not caring. You know, we'll get to that bridge when we cross it. So you're just racing, not knowing that you're breaking the rules. So our goal is to have people want to know the rules, because the consequences will be bigger once you break the rule and you realize that you're going to get 5 or 6 or 10-hour penalty or maybe be disqualified. So that's why ARWS is trying to not be like a police, but just giving you guidance on how to act during the race. So we have standard rules, standard ARWS rules that is always evolving and slightly changing when we come up with a new problem that we have to face. One of the examples is Garmin watches. So we had to adapt that rule. So Garmin introduced adventure racing mode, so we adapted that. And for example, in the last few years, the e-bikes have come as a question. So we have to always adapt to new technologies as well. So we also have rules that are specific for a different race. So some of the problems could be cultural, some of the problems could be typical for a country. Some rules are different, or some cultural problems may appear. So every year, almost every race need to have specific rules for that race. The problem is that when people are not paying attention to normal rules, and they're not going to pay attention to specific rules. So our job is to monitor if some of the rules are going to be broken, and then to have a penalty if needed to a team who broke the rule. I will just hand the mic to Mark. He will talk about the reasons why referees are here. So it's not only not breaking the rules, but somebody in the end has to monitor the rules and of course monitor the penalties after the rules are broken.
Morning everyone. So the reason why the referees are here, in the ideal world, we should have the most boring job in the race and do absolutely nothing. For us that would be a good race, because all the racers would have followed the rules and there would have been no breaches. I guess it's the same with the medics. We want the medics to be the second most boring people in the race. Nobody needs to get treated for anything. So we have the referees because when there is a breach of the rules and there's an unfair advantage then gained, then there needs to be a rectification of that. And we use the referees who are independent of teams, independent of the race directors, and can then apply the rules with no favoritism, consistency. It doesn't matter which team you're in, and no bias. And that's really the point that we have, and the aim that we have of the referees in the race.
So the actual task of the referees has really evolved over the years that referees have been here in adventure racing. Obviously in the early days there were no referees. It was the races were put on by organizations such as Eco Challenge and Raid Gauloise. As a competitor, you were totally at their mercy as to what they chose to enforce, what kind of penalties they would give you. It felt like a free-for-all, and competitors would worry that other teams were gaining an advantage. Since we've had referees, our aim truly is to help the competitors. one of the best ways that we can do that is by giving them peace of mind that every team is racing according to the same rules. So if they're having a hard time out on the course, I think it's reassuring to them to know that no team is having it any easier. So that I feel is an important part of the job. What we do in practice, because we've learnt it's the best way, we cannot be everywhere on a 900-kilometer course. We cannot watch every team among 100 teams, but we can be on the course, we can understand the kind of things that are going on, the kind of challenges the teams are facing regarding weather, terrain. We can visit some of the crucial points where confusion might occur or where problems might happen. And between the three of us, I think we've covered a large part of this course, and I'm sure every team has seen one of us at some point. It still leaves a great deal of the course that we weren't able to watch, but you know, we hope that all the teams have felt they were racing in a situation where they knew they were racing against teams fairly, and you know, so we return to the finish line here, and the final rankings, I hope, represent what the teams really achieved out there on the course. And so that's really the task of the referees, is to make sure the race goes off fairly, and the final ranking is the correct order. Thank you.
I would like to talk a little bit about the communication with organizers and competitors. So, rules in venture racing is pretty new, so we are still trying to figure it out and try to find the best solution. We are always talking amongst each other and trying to come up with a better wording, because wording of some rule can be bended, it could be interpreted in different meaning to different people, especially with the language barriers. So we are trying to make the rules as simple as possible, but to contain all the stuff that is needed for that rule. The importance of communicating referees with the race directors is the most important one, because race directors, especially if they have specific rules for this race, need to realize that having specific rules also complicates things, and we need to know what the penalties are and what will happen if teams break those rules. So you just cannot create a rule. You have to think about it and think about the consequences. And will all the teams be able to do that? So the simple example for this rule is, on this race there was no dragging of boats, and the penalty for that was immediate disqualification. So the problem with that rule was that everybody had to drag a boat at least for 1 meter. So what is actually, if somebody saw somebody dragging a boat for 1 meter, the penalty would be disqualification. Of course not, but it's something that maybe should have been better communicated, because nobody could monitor the teams if they were dragging or not dragging the boats, and the penalty is too severe for the thing that the teams were doing. So I think that communication is really important, and all the referees have to know all the rules beforehand, and then they could talk to the race directors and try to maybe have a better wording or maybe a better solution for those specific rules. Also, the communication with the competitors is of great importance. It is a little bit harder to communicate with teams, but our goal is to create some sort of a channel that we can communicate with teams and competitors. We could have a discussion about certain topics, certain rules, because our job is to serve you. Our job is to make this sport more fair, and we don't want to have quote-unquote unsatisfied customers, but we want to make it as fair as possible, and it is a learning curve for all of us. We're trying. It's only been like maybe 7 or 8 years that we have these rules, and I hope in the future the communication is going to be better. And let's hope that this channel that we can communicate through will be up and running as soon as possible.
One of the wonderful things about adventure racing is you never know what's going to happen. When we go out there for 6, 7, 8, 9 days, we have the uncertainties of the weather and uncertainties of a lot of other things. So one of the problems we've had in the last couple of years, surprisingly frequently, is that a beautifully designed and set up race course has to have some changes made to it during the race. We might have teams spread out by many, many miles by this point, and perhaps the first teams get halfway through a section that is then modified. Perhaps the lead teams get through that section and then it has to be modified. Perhaps almost everybody gets through that section and then it has to be modified. So we have many different things that can happen on a race course. A very common example is if there's some ocean paddling and the winds come up and make it too dangerous. And then we may have teams scattered along the seashore with their kayaks unable to continue. This is obviously a huge logistical problem for the organizers, and until recently we have just had to make up on the spot the way that we will resume the race and the way that we'll modify the rankings or give credit to teams for the amount of work they did on that section prior to the change. And so one of the things that we'll try to do during this off-season is to come up with some guidelines so that organizers and competitors, more importantly, know the kind of choices that we'll make in order to correct a situation where there has to be a course change mid-race. One of the interesting things about adventure racing, there are many interesting things about adventure racing, is that the race book that the competitors have is part of the rules. So that the race book refers to the specific route that was created for the race. If we have a section that is cancelled, now that race book may no longer be valid for certain portions of the race. And that needs to be, any changes to that, to the race book, need to be communicated to the competitors at the same time so they fully understand what they're allowed to do next, what they're meant to do next, and hopefully get the race moving again with the fairest outcome for all the teams. So dealing with the cancellation of sections during a race is a subject that we'd like to work on in this off-season.
So the second last point, making the refereeing consistent, is one that we're working on a lot. We obviously want to get it consistent across the race, but what we're also doing is working to get it consistent across all the AR World Series races. Just to give you a little bit of insight and background into this process, there are a panel of judges or race referees that work with Adrian. Adrian pre-chooses race referees in consultation with race directors throughout the year and get allocated to the various races. There is consultation that happens between race referees. At the end of each event, we actually prepare a race referees report that gets shared with the race refs community, and items get debated and explained. Recently we've started putting theoretical scenarios together and posing them to the race referee community, saying, in this situation, what would you do and how would you handle this and why? And so we're consistently trying to build up this database of precedents that will be used, and looking to get consistency across the AR World Series races. It's also really useful to have a pool of referees working together on an event like this, because we get to share and compare ideas and compare notes, and I think you'll hopefully see loads of improvement on this as we continue this journey about getting consistency.
And then, as adventure racing evolves, and as more and more teams become more competent and more competitive in adventure racing, we find that the rules have to evolve. We mentioned technology. That certainly can prompt an evolution of the rules. We try to keep the changes to the rules as minimal as possible. We want to be very conservative and slow in changing the rules. We don't want to surprise people every year. We don't want to change rules and then have to change them back. So we are cautious when we change the rules, and we'll always try to do those rule changes during the off-season, over the winter, before the next season of adventure racing. And some of the rules that you might be looking for next year, when we publish next year's rule book, I'm pretty certain there'll be at least one change. I think we might reference what is a mountain bike. We all use mountain bikes here, but we have not yet defined what a mountain bike is, and so I think we'll come up with some definition of what counts as a mountain bike, and in effect, what bike are you able to use at an adventure race. Remember that if an organizer wants to, they can alter the mandatory gear list. So even if we specify for AR World Series that it must be a mountain bike, an organizer could say, for this race I recommend a gravel bike, and so that possibility still exists for the organizer, or an e-bike indeed. We'll write up some guidelines for the situation for cancelled sections, as I discussed. And another interesting situation that is caused by the increasing competition that comes to these races is that while we love the assistance between teams, we're aware that it's possible 2 or 3 teams could come together to a race now and all work together for the purpose of getting one of their teams to the finish line faster. And so while we really love the camaraderie between teams, we love their ability to help each other out, we do want to make it clear that that should be help during the race, not help that you have organized prior to the race. So that's an example of another rule that you might well see coming up next year. So I don't know whether our compare here would allow us the time to take any questions.
We're running short.
All right, apparently his answer was no. And that may well be a relief for the 3 of us referees here. But in closing, please, every competitor, read the rules. Please, every volunteer, read the rules. And now that we have media so prevalent, please, media, team media and supporters all know the rules that they should abide by to make for a fair race. We love to see you race hard, and we hope you will race hard in the future, and also race fair in the spirit of good competition. So thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thanks so much for our referees working behind the scenes and making it better for all of us to participate in an organized matter.